everyone. So this is going to be part two of our Q&A, a continuation from the last video. We hope
Just
that you
kind
like
of
it.
some general grief questions that were didn't have like a specific category. So I see here this next question is how can I grieve multiple dogs that I lost in a short time frame all at once? E.g., do I spend a day on each dog? Do I think of each dog one after the other on a given day? Do I grieve a dog a week and then the next dog another week? Um, so the answer that I'm going to give is it might be frustrating because it's not going to be a solid answer, but it's going to be like when you say these out loud to yourself, which one sounds right?
Mhm.
It is true that we really are unable to process multiple griefs at one time, and it can
Yep.
get really confusing. Sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, I haven't thought of this one enough, or I'm really missing this one specifically right now. Do I not love the other one? But if you do give yourself that time, whatever feels right to you, same day, different week, what it allows you to do is spend this time guilt free thinking about just one of them. And you don't have to worry, am I not thinking about the other one enough? You can just focus on this relationship, the era of your life that they spent with you, and what this grief means to you and everything like that. And know that it's okay to do that because you know what? The other one will have their time, later on in the week. I think a week at a time can be difficult because our brains just aren't computers. We can't program it to be like, all right, next week is just, this pet. But either two in a day or like different days can be helpful. And then you can also grieve your pack, or your pride that you had. You can have two different candles that you light when you walk in the door. So a big thing of it is there is no right or wrong. Like when we say all of these things, what feels right, what sounds right to you, and know that it's not going to be a wrong answer if
Yep.
you're listening to what your heart is telling you.
Exactly. And I think it's important to remember that love doesn't have a limit. So it's not like you're going to run out of love, or grief while you're thinking about one baby. You still are going to have it for the next one. So yeah, just do whatever works best for you and whatever feels right. So the next one, how can I remain supportive of friends who seem stuck in their grief? So I think this really speaks to who you are as a person, that you care so much about other people so deeply that, in the midst of your grief journey, you're worried about where they are and how to help them. But again, like we mentioned at the beginning, you have to put on your oxygen mask before you can put on other people and help theirs. So you really need to take care of yourself. You need to focus on your grief journey. You need to do what you need to do for your own grief and, your own feelings or whatever it is that you're going through in your journey. And just, allow yourself the space to take care of you first. Now, that doesn't mean you can't be there for other people. We love creating communities. We have our support group, we have this Facebook group. So we want you all to be able to connect to each other and support one another and uplift each other as you go through something that's so deep and so heavy. But if it feels like it's starting to weigh on you too much, that you are focusing on other people's grief and not your own, maybe take that time to step back and reevaluate what you're going through, reevaluate what you're doing. And if that means leaving this Facebook group, know that we always give you permission to do that because it can get heavy, and can sometimes feel like you're taking on other people's grief as your own. Allow yourself to step back from our support groups, allow yourself to just step back from the wonderful people that you've met in this community and just say, I just need a minute for myself. And again, self-care is not selfish. So again, I think it's really beautiful that you want to be there for other people. That's exactly what we want in this community. But we also understand that this is a very heavy subject. It's a very heavy thing to go through. Grief is very real. And so allow yourself the time and the space to set those boundaries for yourself too.
Yeah, definitely big on boundaries. And
Mhm.
just recognizing too that you know, that you're not their grief coach, you're not their
Mhm.
therapist. And if that is something that they're really needing, you can absolutely advocate for them to get the support that will help them through this in a loving, non-judgmental way. Um, it can be really difficult, whenever we are first in grief, it's almost impossible to not feel consumed by it, like we talked about earlier. But again, using an I statement, speaking for myself, when I first experienced my first really traumatic grief, I only wanted to be around, other people who were grieving, other people who understood the significance of this loss and really clung on to that. And as I started to be more present, as I started to discover and rediscover and recognize other parts of myself that existed that are not 100% tied to this loss, that are
Mhm.
still worth getting to know, being seen by myself in the world. I sometimes did not want to be just only thinking and talking about my grief all the time because I was
Mhm.
able to carry it with love.
Yeah.
It wasn't something that for me personally always made me sad. And I didn't always necessarily want to, do a deep dive into that. And there's different people, and it can be really difficult when we're talking to somebody that we really were there for each other and related to each other in this grief. And now we're on different grief journeys. They look different for everybody. Timelines are different for everybody. Um, so yeah, just kind of recognizing that it is absolutely okay, and it's okay to tell them, "Hey, I'm here, on Thursday nights if you really want to talk about it." It's okay to set those boundaries for yourself on what feels right. And it's
Mhm.
also say okay to like throw out there like, "Hey, I also kind of want to know about you, or I also like if you want to talk about how work was today. Like we can talk about that. If that's a friendship that you want to nurture and continue to kind of get to know and move forward. And I think that that question really dives right into this next one as well, which talks about a family member who is dealing with their grief in an angry way, like getting mad at the rest of us all the time for insignificant things, yelling, also ignoring. How do we cope with the anger stage of grief in another person when we are all grieving too, but not in the angry way? And, we talk a lot about dealing with our own anger, but that's a good point. How do we deal with somebody else who's being um, just in an angry stage of grief, and that's really not easy. And it's a lot harder to hold compassion for somebody when they're not being very nice to us.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to do it when they are being nice, but when they're not, it's difficult to recognize what that is. I am a huge advocate of figuring out our objective when we talk to somebody ahead of time and then choosing our delivery. And so, just kind of talking to them and letting them know, like, look, I see your pain. We see it. It's
Mhm.
real. And our hearts break with yours, even if maybe you're not seeing it every day. We have to keep in mind, guys, that sadness is very much feels like a passive emotion. It can make us feel helpless sometimes. Um,
Mhm.
Anger is an active one, right? It gives us something to do. It lets us like release all of those emotions and that hurt that it's covering. So, let them know that you see that, their pain, and you can be honest. You can say that when you're ready to talk about it, we want to be here for you.
Mhm.
But that your behavior, it hurts the family, and you might not know that. But when you say these things, like when you yell at me for forgetting to put a cup in the dishwasher, and that I'm, kind of running on E in grief as well, that is hurtful, and that doesn't seem like you. That's not the you
Mhm.
that we are used to and know and love. And if it's something that continues on, again, we are big on boundaries. It's okay to say, well, I'm going to kind of emotionally remove myself. And guys, that's really hard when it's somebody that you care about,
Yep.
and our attachment styles. But having that honest conversation, letting them know that that door is always open. And if you even have to set those boundaries, make sure that they know that when they are ready to kind of explore that hurt underneath the anger, that you are there for them in
Mhm.
a compassionate, loving way that
Yep.
doesn't have to be rooted in like anger.
Yep. Yep. No, I agree. And yeah, like you said, just reminding them I'm here for you, but I'm here for you, when you're much calmer, when you're, in a better headspace. And, I like, we're saying like allowing them the space to go through this in the way they do, because some of us are angry grievers. We all grieve in a different way. But that doesn't mean that you have to take it that way. So, again, boundaries, step back where you can, and just really try to, be there for them in any way that you need to be. But again, don't do it at the at the risk of your own grief or the risk of your own emotions as well. But it is hard wanting to be there for other people, but we also need to be there for ourselves too. Put
Yeah.
yourself first in the situation, allow yourself to do that.
Yeah.
So, sort of taking a turn into what we were just talking
Well,
about.
I want to just add one thing to that real quick of what boundaries are. Boundaries
Oh,
are not telling somebody else that you need this from them. It's
mhm,
saying, if this happens, this is what I'm going to do. Right? It's something where I am going to set this boundary. I am going to remove myself.
yeah.
And so it allows it to be where you're not having to control them, and you're not even telling them what to do necessarily. You are just saying
Hmm.
that what you are going to do if this behavior continues in a really understandable way. Some people react okay to them, some people it's hard. So you have to do it without an expectation of how they're going to react to it, but just recognizing that boundaries are a decision that we make for ourselves and a protection for ourselves of how we're going to behave um if it feels like it's leaning towards an abusive feeling, even if it's not an abusive relationship, but it's like, no, this is not healthy, so I'm
Yeah.
going to remove myself until you're ready to talk about it.
Yeah, definitely using a lot of I statements is my suggestion. So saying, I need to take a step back, or I just, need to do this for myself instead of you are making me. And that's again, you need to be able to give yourself the control, and you're not trying to control other people, but you're allowing self your space, but you're also emphasizing to them what you need, and what is best for you too, in that sense. Yeah. All right. So taking a turn, now we're going to talk about different afterlife questions. So, sort of like I mentioned earlier, at one point, we all believe in something different, and that's okay. So, this one question, it says, "Why do I feel/wonder that my pet is somehow mad at me or doesn't miss me? I haven't received any signs of her visiting me since I lost her." So, the big thing with signs is we're all going to see them differently, and we'll see them when we're ready. So signs come to people in different ways. I see cardinals. Every time I see a cardinal, I truly believe that it's my loved one coming back. So I always say hi. But I see people who talk about how they get signs from their baby in dreams or in rainbows or feathers that they find, or, being around other animals who act exactly the same as their one that passed away. And if you believe in reincarnation or that they went to heaven, or, whatever it is, your signs are going to look different. But just because if you haven't seen one, it doesn't mean that they don't miss you, doesn't mean that they don't love you. It's just maybe you haven't seen one yet, and that's okay. I know some people who see them right away all the time, or some people will get one sign here and one sign months later. But that doesn't mean that that connection is severed, doesn't mean that love doesn't exist. It's just going to come, again, when you're ready to see it and when it happens. And the crazy thing about afterlife and questions that we all have is that no one's ever come back from the afterlife. So whatever you believe in and whatever that sign is, really lean into it and allow yourself the space to just love it, and have that conversation with your baby, and maybe you write down the sign that you see or take a picture of it and sort of start collecting that and remind yourself that they're always with you, just in a different way.
Yeah, no, I'm that's perfectly said. And, I want to comment on this idea though that says, that them not seeing signs makes them feel that somehow their pet is mad at them or that they don't miss them. And I want to take a moment that may sound controversial to some, but I tend to think it's important that we don't anthropomorphize our pets too much or humanize them too much. And that's not to minimize the importance of the relationship. It's the fact of the matter of they are awesome because they're not human, guys. Like, that
Mhm.
is why there is this feeling of safety, why we can take our emotional armor off. We know there's not a second agenda. We know that there's not manipulation. We know that there's not resentment that's going to come out the moment that, like, one little poke, we know all of those things. So they're very human qualities.
Yes.
And, and human relationships are very complex. And there is sometimes there's talking back, there's like all of these things. We don't necessarily get that with our pets. So just like recognizing that this idea that they are sitting there really angry at you, it's important to just recognize that, were they like that in life?
Mhm.
Like, were they was your relationship where they were angry at you for weeks and weeks and weeks at a time. And it's a hard thing sometimes to really think about with objectivity because it hurts. It hurts so much. But it's just kind of a different way to think about it, and recognizing that them being a dog or a cat or whatever they were, it is not an insult. It's part of why that relationship was so special and why they were so awesome. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
closer to my dogs than almost every other human on the planet. And it's because of the fact that, I don't have to worry if I'm having a bad day. Oh, I don't want to bother them. I don't want to call this person, make an appointment. I can't get an appointment until next week. They're just there unconditionally,
Mhm.
and we can't expect that of our humans. And so, just recognizing that, not humanizing them doesn't mean minimizing them in any way. So just a perspective to kind of put out there,
Mhm.
when it comes to that.
Yeah.
And then we have here, on the same idea of afterlife, will I see my pet in heaven? Which, is a great question, and I know that sometimes we have been told statements that can feel really hurtful by people
Mhm.
who, have really strong beliefs on their particular faith and scriptures and what it says. I really think that you can pull scriptures apart and get different answers depending on which book you're looking at, things like that. There's a great book that we really like. It's I Will See You in Heaven. There's a cat and a dog version, that can also offer a little bit of understanding with that perspective of heaven for, those of us who we hold that idea very close to our hearts. But when people try to say that, animals don't go to heaven or they don't have souls, I just have to ask, like, have you ever looked into your pet's eyes? To me, looking into their eyes is a very spiritual experience. There's absolutely a soul there. Um,
Mhm.
that's my personal perspective, but I'm also okay. I've learned to sit with the discomfort of not knowing and not
Mhm.
having that answer, knowing that energy cannot be created or destroyed. And it's discomfort at first. Eventually, for me, it's not as uncomfortable. But it's one of those things where I encourage you to explore all of the different ideas of the afterlife and
Mhm.
heaven and animals in heaven, and keep what resonates and leave what doesn't.
Mhm.
It's nobody can tell you like what you should believe or what it is, because it's one of those things that, yeah, we can't prove it or disprove it. It's called faith for a reason.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And like I said earlier, no one's ever gone back, gone to the afterlife and come back and told us what's there. So it's really up for interpretation. And again, you need to believe in what you need to believe to get through this. And what I think can be helpful is if you're questioning, will I see them in heaven? Will I see them here, this, that, or the other? Christiana and I can tell you what we believe in and what, we really hold close to us. But is that going to bring you any peace? I don't know. So I think what you can try to do is write down all of these questions that you have and try to get your own answers to them too. And just try to, again, find your own peace. Whatever brings you comfort, just makes sense to you, makes it feel like, you are keeping that connection with your baby, whatever that looks like. Let yourself do it. Like Christiana was mentioning, people like to try to tell us what we should and shouldn't believe, but you do what you need to do. So try writing down those questions, see what comes up. Again, there's the really great book that Christiana mentioned, and there's tons of other great books about afterlife if you're really just, interested in exploring and seeing what really, sticks with you. You can always also ask people too what they believe and see what sticks with you. But I really am a firm believer that you need to just find your own peace in this, and there's no right or wrong answer either. That love is still there. I don't think that love dies with our baby's physical body. It just changes what it looks like, and you'll see them in whatever ways that you do. Yeah. So now, sort of talking about beliefs and seeing our babies and signs and things like that, trying to find ways to memorialize and honor them. Again, keeping that connection and that bond is really, really important as you go through your grief journey. So all of these questions that we have next are about that, ways to just keep them around. So, how do we address this feeling of not wanting the sadness and pain to fade because it feels like we're losing details about our fur babies? So, something that we mentioned a few times in this video so far is that grief is not rooted in sadness. You can feel it in other ways too. You can feel, joy and happiness and, longing and whatever it is outside of sadness for our babies because that's what they brought us when they were here in person. And so it doesn't mean it has to change with them not being here physically. So finding ways to remind yourself of that joy that they brought you can just remind you that their death doesn't have to define the entire time that you guys spent together, whether that was months or years. Their death does not have to, again, define doesn't have to be everything about that. So you can find photos, write down memories, create a memorial table. Again, writing that list of all the things that you did versus what you didn't do for your baby. And a lot of the things you did do for them will probably bring you joy, like reminding yourself of the vacations that you went on, the grooming appointments, how cute they looked when they came back, the times that you just snuggled on the couch and watched movies together. Try doing those things again, and that can remind you of that joy. So if you feel like you're losing, details or memories, again, we talked about how there's so much healing in writing. Write down those memories so they have nowhere else to go. I know people who pick up their phone, open their notes app, and just start, word vomiting on their notes app of those memories when they come up. So just reminding yourself of those little things, and again, the moments that you had together outside of those last few days.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And in that note, I'm going to jump to this other question that is pretty related, where it just says that how do I work through the fear of forgetting my soul pet, the way he smelled, his soft fur, etc. And I want to validate that that's a really a valid concern for most of us when we lose somebody, whether it be a pet or a human. Um, and I want to just kind of bring up this quote first and foremost of by Maya Angelou. It's people will forget what you say, people will forget what you do, they will never forget how you make them feel. So first and foremost, take some time to write down, how did they make you feel? How did they make you feel when you were with them? And also, how did they make you feel about yourself, about your sense of self-worth, about your sense of your capabilities, of your purpose, the idea of like stability, all of these things. How did they make you feel? Take some time to really write those down. Find the verbiage for it. We often don't have the verbiage for the relationships with our loved ones because they're not required. Yeah, we tell them we love them all the time, but it's not required to really explain in words exactly why this relationship is so special.
Mhm.
Um, and recognize that that's yours to keep. That's not going anywhere. Even if it's not at the top of your mind all the time, every day, it's always there for you to access. As far as, work, like thinking about like the smell of their paws and things like that, there are some really great meditations. You can always reach out to us if you're looking for those to kind of get us in a place where we can access some of those memories.
Mhm.
Because yeah, our relationship with our loved ones are not two dimensional. It's not just, we tend to focus on pictures and videos, but it's their entire essence. It's how they felt when we picked them up. Did they
Mhm.
feel like a football? Were they top heavy? How their breath smelled. Was it metallic? Was it fishy? How their fur felt. Did it feel like a bunch of cotton balls or wiry or like velvet when you couldn't, like, the kind of velvet where you go like this and it's two different colors,
Mhm.
that as kids we all like played with. But really like try to find those descriptors if you really just kind of want to go into their full essence of who they are, because we experience people with all of our senses, not just what we see and what's recorded in video. So that's really understandable. And it is possible to access that if we want to kind of write those things down, so that we don't forget them, so that we can
Mhm.
kind of read them when we need to and access those memories again. So I
Yeah.
just kind of wanted to, sorry, jump to that question because I think that it's really related to this first one.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. I love the meditation. It's so true. There's so much outside of them, outside of the memories and just their essence. It's so beautiful. So the next one says, how do I get out of a grief spiral where all I'm doing is replaying the last day and considering where I went wrong? What do you do when the meditation and the pictures and the things that make me feel closer to her don't work? So again, this is a lot of reminding yourself that those last few days do not have to define your relationship with your baby or who you are as their parent or their caretaker. There's so much more to you, and there's so much more to them than the illness that they had or the death that they went through. And so, again, I think, like, you said that you were trying these meditations and pictures and things like that just didn't work. And that's okay. But I still think there's so much healing in trying to write or to tell your story. Sometimes saying these things out loud, if you say, well, I did this treatment for this reason, and then you think about it and you're like, oh, I don't actually feel guilty about that anymore. Because when you say things out loud or when you write them, again, you're pulling it out of your brain, you're processing it better, but versus being in that cycle and not being able to know where the thought starts or stops.
Yeah.
Sorry, starts or stops. And so, find those safe spaces to tell your story and to just talk about it. And again, where you think you went wrong. And, again, I don't think that you went wrong. You probably did everything amazingly for your baby. And again, we do the best we can with what we know at the time. But write that list out of what you did versus what you didn't do for them. And even if that doesn't make you feel closer to them in the sense of, a memorial or honoring them, that it can just begin to help you process that grief spiral because again, grief is not something that's meant to be lived 24/7. So make sure you're taking breaks from your grief too when you're in those cycles. Even say out loud, say, okay, now I'm going to do something for myself, and you go and turn on your favorite movie and just have a good laugh. Just separate yourself from this grief, give yourself breaks from it, because if you're in that spiral, it can feel like it's never ending. And when we think about our babies too and how we want to honor them, when you think about it, honoring them, you don't want to honor them in this, that space the whole time. You want to honor the joy and the love and everything else. Cause like Christiana mentioned earlier, that's the beautiful thing about animals is we don't argue with them. They don't hold grudges. They are so loving and so forgiving. And that's what makes them not people. And that's why we like them so much. So remembering that too, that they're not humans and they're just happy to be around you and happy to be talked about. So hopefully that helps a little. But the grief spirals, they can be tough. But a lot of patience and grace and kindness with yourself too as you go through that and process it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And when you're in a grief spiral, sometimes it can be really hard to be intentional and think about our thoughts.
Hmm.
So, practicing some grounding techniques, you can look it up online. There's so many. And like, so a grounding technique will just kind of like force us to really is my head where my feet are at right now? Because when we're in that spiral, our head is not where our feet are at in that moment. It is a week ago, a month ago, however long ago, right? So, as far as like getting ourselves out of that grief spiral so that we can really be intentional and find ways to connect and recognizing that before we can get to a place of acceptance in our grief, sometimes acceptance can feel like a dirty word when we're grieving. So I
Hmm.
always say we'll shoot for the other A's because maybe we don't have to accept it. We sure do have to adapt and adjust.
Hmm.
And recognizing that the relationship has changed. And so maybe the ways that you feel connected are going to change. Sometimes it's hard. It's like I'm getting farther and farther away from the last time they ate out of their bowl. Okay, well, that relationship has changed, and the way that you that way that you express that love has changed. So ask yourself maybe if you plant a flower, if you use that bowl as a planter, or you have a flower and you use that bowl to water the flower. Okay, well, when's the last time you watered your flower? Maybe that's the last time you felt connected. If you have a wind chime that is in memoriam to them, don't ask yourself, oh, like the last day was, now it's been, 3 months. It's getting so far away. Okay, well, it's been 3 months since the last time that you pet them. When's the last time you heard that wind chime? Right?
Hmm.
That connection is going to look different. We have to adapt to that difference and recognize that that love is still just as profound and beautiful and important. And it's not an easy thing to do, but it's a lot of intentionality in recognizing that that connection and the way that you feel connected can and look and feel differently. And a lot of it is not necessarily going to be as physical as it used to be.
Hmm.
Um, but as we kind of do that, but yes, we do have to get out of that spiral to be intentional about it. Being able to think about our own thoughts is absolutely a gift.
Hmm.
Sometimes it doesn't always feel like it, but it is this gift that we have, that we can kind of decide, like, is it true? When we're ruminating on that last day, we're ruminating on that, like, as I said before, let's not paint half truths. Give
Hmm.
yourself the full picture. And like Caitlin said, their death does not define their life.
Mhm.
period. It's not that it just doesn't have to define it. Their death does not define their life. And so, just try to go into it and ask yourself, am I thinking about this last day with curiosity and
Mhm.
compassion, or am I doing it with judgment? Because who does judgment serve? It doesn't serve your loved one, it doesn't serve you. So try to kind of change that judgment to curiosity. It can do us a lot more good.
Mhm.
Um, and then this last question, and then we'll finish up because we want to make sure that you guys are able to hear all of this and doesn't last too long. Ideas for remembering my dog and working through grief. Any creative ways beyond pet loss jewelry and photos to remember him by? Activities, good books, podcasts. Caitlin, what do you think about that?
I was going to say, so the best way to get some of these is definitely shoot us an email. We have a long list of actually podcasts, books, and activities that you can do to, you know, think about your grief and how you're going to move through it, or even again, like memorials, things to do for your baby. But as we mentioned a lot, because this is something we both as coaches and all the other coaches too really love is journaling. You could go on Etsy and you could get a custom made journal for your baby, or you just grab one at the dollar store, whatever. But you just make that your safe space for your thoughts and feelings about your baby, or your memory journal, whatever it is, it's your space to do that. Different mindfulness activities. So Christiana mentioned grounding techniques. And, a lot of times our grief and anxiety that we're feeling is rooted in what's already happened or what's going to happen, and neither of which we can change or know what's going to be. So trying to just bring yourself back to this present moment and, bring yourself to the here and now. Meditation's really, really great for that. There's some good meditation podcasts that Christiana has found. Again, we're more than happy to share those with you, but just bringing yourself to this moment and saying, you are safe. You can't control what's going to happen. And as scary as that is, there's nothing wrong with it. But your baby's still always here with you as you go through and navigate, your life moving forward. And then thinking about what's already happened. Again, it's hard because we can't go back and change it, but you are safe and you're a good person, and your baby was there and was loved and is still loved. You can create a playlist of different songs, which I've seen a lot of people post on this Facebook page, their playlists. And I think that's so beautiful because music's really good about bringing us to the here and now too. And just hearing, really joyful songs, or, even having a good cry. That's, part of grief too. If you hear a song that makes you cry, sit down and cry and listen to that song. I think that's a beautiful way to honor them too. And, creating just doing things with your hands too, keeping your hands and your mind busy. So Christiana mentioned taking their water bowl, turning that into a planter. Maybe you create a garden outside now that it's getting warmer. Just go outside, plant flowers that remind you of your baby, or ones that you just really like. Make that garden for them and have that space to sit outside and be there. Creating scrapbooks. I know everything, we're in a digital age now, so everybody's photos are on their phone. But take the time, maybe you go to the pharmacy and you print out a bunch of photos, and then you sit down and you just spend time every day scrapbooking. And I think that are, just a few different ways. Can you think of any other ones, Christiana?
Yeah, yeah. I love the playlist idea. I talk a lot about a different way to connect with them is like ask yourself, okay, if they were the navigator in the passenger seat on a road trip, like, and they were in charge of the radio, like, what would their genre be? What would their jams be? Like, would they be a Swiftie? Would they be listening to some classic rock or some Queen, some heavy metal? Would they be listening? Are they like a rap lyricist? Do they like meaningful like rap music, or like some Lady Gaga, like whatever it may be, like kind of have some fun and think about like what their personality would be, if you had to picture that. And it's kind of a different way to connect with them. And it's a playlist that we can make that's not necessarily just like sad songs about grief. It's not a bunch of, the wind beneath my wings kind of songs, which those are great to access our emotions and important. But it's a different kind of way with a different sense. Usually we use a lot of our visual, when it comes to memorializing and stuff like that. So it's kind of a different way to be creative about it and think about it differently. Um, creative expression in any way. What if you're not a writer, that's okay. Maybe just like take some paint and a canvas and see what happens. Don't put the pressure on yourself for it to look any way. I know that I look at some of mine that I've done, and some of them don't make any sense, but just even based on the colors, you can tell how it's feeling in that moment. If you create music, you can do that. Whatever that may be. So creating not necessarily doesn't have to be like a memorial creation, but it can
Mhm.
be a recognition of how you're feeling about your loved one, your grief right now, and whatever comes of that. Kind of allow yourself to embrace that. And I love the memorial rocks, especially if we did have a dog, or some of us walked our cats on a leash or in a stroller. Taking some memorial rocks, painting them or writing on them, and going to some of our old trails, and leaving a rock there every time we go to that trail. And so when we go there, there's a piece of them there. There's that connection there. There's so many different ways we could probably go on for another like hour about it. So again, like Caitlin said, anything that we talked about today, if you're wanting to know a little bit more information, looking for some more resources, do
Mhm.
not hesitate to reach out. You can always email us at petlosssupport@lapoflove.com. We're happy to send those to you.
Mhm.
Or, of course, if you ever want to do a one-on-one and really kind of process it and personalize it, we're happy to do that too, and honored to do that. But yeah, we have to go ahead and wrap up soon. But Caitlin, did you have anything else that you wanted to add before we finished up today? What are your thoughts about these questions that we've had? Just yeah.
I was just going to say, I'm so thankful that all of you sent in those questions. I think that they were really, really good ones, and really just really just speak to who you guys are going through this grief journey and wanting to go through this in a really healthy way, and then also honor your baby at the same time. And like I said a few times, but all of your animals are so lucky to have you. They really, really are, to have these people who are grieving them in this way and want to remember them for the rest of their lives. I just think that's so incredible. We are just surrounded by the most amazing pet parents ever. And we love that we get to do this. And I hope that listening to some of the answers for these questions from us, bring you some peace and, really give you some things to think about and to work through. But, the important thing is just to, like I said it a lot and I do it all the time in all my sessions, but just give yourself a lot of grace, really, really do. And give yourself a lot of kindness. You guys are good people. And I'm so glad we got to talk about this and got to share some of our information. Like Christiana mentioned, we could go on for more hours about grief. Unfortunately, we can't, but always feel free to reach out to us. We love hearing from you. We love hearing about your babies. We are just so honored to do this work and to hold these safe spaces for everybody. Yeah, so I'm so glad we got to do this.
Yeah, I agree completely. It's our biggest honor to be able
Mhm.
to walk a few steps at a time on this journey with you. As I say, you don't always, nobody can take the journey for you, but you don't have to take every step alone. And to
Mhm.
be trusted with that does not fall short on us.
Yeah.
What an honor that is, and what a gift that is when you share your love with the world. So reach out to us. We hope that you got something from
Mhm.
this, or that at least a different perspective to kind of think about your grief journey and your relationship with your loved one. And just like with everything, keep what resonates from this and leave what doesn't. If there's something
Yep.
that didn't resonate with you, that's okay. That's okay.
Mhm.
Keep what resonates, leave what doesn't. Reach
Yep.
out, that we're here for you in any way that we can be. And yeah, thank you for being part of our lives. Bye,
Thank
guys.